Well, we live in interesting times. The first known case was discovered in November, but nobody paid attention. It was all too local at the time, and there were no major news reports at all. Nobody could yet predict what was about to happen. By December, it became alive and active. The epicenter had over 100,000 people coming through every single day, and each one of them was exposed to the virus and what would soon become a global pandemic. The people were just a small portion of the problem. The location was also home to piggery, poultry, and many other animals. And researchers from Oxford would later confirm their theory that it must have started in animals. Knowing this, however, didn't help the world much. We do know now that if we paid close attention to these early signs, we would be able to save many, many lives. There are those who believe that the virus was around for months or perhaps even years before it actually began as an outbreak. Yet it has now become deadly as it quickly and efficiently goes for the target, goes for the lungs, and kills them. A simple sneeze is enough to get infected, as each sneeze produces more than 1 million particles of the virus that can completely infect another person. All of this at the peak of humanity's ability to travel, which is of course a recipe for complete disaster and breakdown. A few more months to go by, and we're at a point where the virus is completely out of control. Deaths are surmounting, governments are lying about the numbers, covering up their own attempts to save themselves, doing weird things, and people are dying. Some go completely crazy and ignore the virus, and even more people are dying in these countries. Others go on complete lockdown. 500,000 confirmed cases at this point, probably much higher in reality. If we could test effectively, which we can't, resources would show us that there's a lot more people infected. Everything is strained. The hospitals can't handle the disease. The world is dying. New York and the US are hit badly with hundreds of deaths daily. Everything comes to a standstill. The economy shuts down and waits. Did it pass? Did we survive? The virus is starting to slow down. Some governments think it's time to reopen and open up the economy. The trade starts to slowly resume, and we think that the worst is behind us. Yet the virus has other plans. It just mutated. And the second wave of the virus hits the world and starts killing faster and harder and more. This time around, it kills up around 25 million people. Some say that the real number is much closer to 100 million people, or both World Wars combined. You may have been thinking this whole time that I was talking about COVID, as we all do, but I wasn't. This was the case of the Spanish flu of 1918. It does sound familiar, doesn't it? It does sound familiar that some countries are taking that approach. It does sound familiar that we might open up our economies very soon. But what if it repeats itself? 100 million people at that time was a huge portion of the whole population of the world. It was the biggest disaster of our century, and probably more than both world wars, as I said. And history tends to repeat itself. But what I want to talk to you today about is not how bad things are going to be. I'm sure we get enough of those. But I'm curious about what's going to happen after. How can we predict the future? And I think to predict the future, all we really have to do is to reiterate the past. I have just right now said what happened before, and it's very hard to actually say that I wasn't talking about now. So what did happen after the Spanish flu? Well, the world changed completely. Everything about the world changed. Personal automobiles became a thing. We could travel alone, moving away from the virus in public places. We could buy cars. Penicillin was developed. Healthcare system was completely changed. USSR, or at the time Russia, was the first country to introduce public healthcare for everyone. Other countries followed suit soon after. Personal televisions came to the scene, and entertainment was changed. We got vacuum cleaners to change our home. We started traveling differently outside our environments. Horses are not as efficient as bikes to travel outside, so biking became a thing. We wanted to be more careful with our food supplies and to control what we eat ourselves so that we don't get the virus. So we had fridges developed. Music and entertainment changed. We became more interested in lively music like jazz and blues. We even became so disinterested in going outside and get infected that we developed things like dishwashers and dishwashers, yes. Very importantly, urbanization started to happen. People started to figure out that in order to survive, you need to be close to healthcare, you need to be close to cities, you need to be close to work. Because another thing that changed is factories. Because at that time, people decided to change how they work and how do they make money. They need to be ready. Clothing changed, radios became a thing, women became able to vote. US changed their market approach. They became a free market economy. Post started sending things by airplanes. In overall, everything changed completely. And 1920s became one of the most booming decades of our time. It's called the Golden 20s, the Great 20s. In any language, there's some name for the 20s. And almost all countries had a huge boom at that time. The same can be said of any other depression that we had that was followed by an upside. So what am I going to predict of what's going to happen in 2020? Well, as I said, I'm just going to reiterate the past because this is going to happen. I believe that we're going to change how we transport ourselves. It's either going to be completely autonomous. We're going to be much more safer from other people. We want to not be involved with others. Healthcare is going to change because we clearly see that we're not coping. We need to make sure that it's better done, more decentralized. It has ability to be more anti-fragile and try to deal with many problems. Entertainment is going to change. Home entertainment is already a thing, but that is going to change as well. Perhaps VR, perhaps more communication. The way we do appliances at home and otherwise and gadgets are going to be more focused on how to deal with post-virus world. The way we move is changing already. Everybody is doing gyms at home. I think the way we move outside is going to change. We already have new ways of transporting ourselves. I think there's going to be a huge industry of doing from home. Do everything from home. 3D printers, whatever it is you can do from home, you will be doing from home. Micro factories, micro productions, micro businesses. You're much more likely to create your own business from home than you are to go and work with someone else in an office space. Speaking of office spaces, I think that is going to change completely. Nowadays, people are very comfortable at their homes, some of them, and some of them are not. And I think that's going to make a move that office space is not going to be as utilized by companies. Work is going to change. How do we work? A lot of people that have experienced this process of being at home for a long time are discovering that this is a way to work. So I believe that now they can come back to their jobs and their bosses and say, well, look, before I didn't know that I can work efficiently. Now I can. So you have to allow me to work from home. I think we're also going to see a move away from the cities because of that. People are going to realize that you don't need to pay 2 million euros in Hong Kong for a 10 meter square flat if you can live 200 kilometers south for like a fraction of the cost. You don't need to be in the city center to be effective for many things that we do. The way we do news and media is clearly broken. That's going to need to change. And I think the whole societal fabric of how we interact, what governments do is going to change. Some governments, I think, will collapse completely and totally. Probably some big ones as well. And how we communicate is going to change. So I think it's going to repeat itself as it always does. And I think it's very important now to look at that and prepare yourself. And I think it's going to touch every aspect of our lives, from logistics to packaging to just-in-time to retail, everything. But what is more important than all of these changes is the big paradigm shift. And this is what I really want to talk to you about, because I think it's somewhat easy to predict those small things, the small innovations, the small things that are going to be opportunities for you to make a living off. But I think we need to talk about what is it going to change in the fabric of our society. What's going to be the paradigm shift? And I predict 7 things at the moment, and I'm hopefully going to predict more. First, I think money is going to lose its value, not in a stock exchange type of way, but what does it get you? Now that we see a lot of people dying from coronavirus, no matter how powerful, rich, poor they are, it equalizes the money. And you realize that when you're stuck at home, it doesn't matter if your home is 500 square meters. Your money doesn't buy you the things that you truly need at the time of crisis like this. So everybody is afraid of the virus, and we're all more equal because of that. So I think the very essence of money is going to be coming up and again, and we need to discuss what it's going to do to the world. I think we're also going to devalue large clusters, both of people and other things. Being together in large, huge communities, like huge metropolitan cities, is going to lose its value, because it's going to be possible for small cities and small villages and small even communities to offer as much safety, protection, healthcare as big cities can do right now, not to mention that large cities are now more of a threat than they are of a benefit. So why live there and spend 10x money for buying an apartment there than somewhere else? And I think that goes into the devaluation of proximity and distance. I think what's going to change is, how do we value distance? Because before, if you're far away from the city, that was a cost to get things to the city, and very high cost. That cost is becoming smaller. Even if you're transporting goods, the price of that cost, the last mile, the proximity, is becoming smaller. So we're going to devalue the distance by a lot. And that means people will be able to work from anywhere. We'll also revalue things. We realize now that health is of primary concern, and we need to take care of our health and our being and our race, because we need to, as humanity, to grow forward and go ahead. We're also going to reevaluate our consciousness. And I think, I want to make that point as simple as possible, but basically what I'm trying to say is that at the moment when you are at home for a long period of time, I hope all of you are, you have so much time to really think about what it is that you like, right? You are at home and you realize, well, do I like this home? Do I like the way I live? Do I like the way I work? Do I have a purpose in life? Do I work for the right things? Is my work important? I've been doing these things, but in a time like this, maybe my work doesn't add any of value. And then you need to reevaluate your whole consciousness. With all the positive things that is happening to the environment right now, we're also going to see that we have a direct effect on the environment. Before, people could argue very easily, well, we don't know if it's really humans doing all this. Well, now it's kind of hard to argue against. With dolphins coming back into Venice, it's kind of hard to say, well, we don't have an effect on the environment. So with that, we'll be more conscious of how we treat the environment. And all of this comes back to the main thing, that everybody will need to reevaluate who they are after this virus period is over, which I think is going to be much longer than most people predict. If we look at history, it was 2 years then, it might be about 2 years now. So what does this mean for you? How can you prepare for that? How can you prepare for this paradigm shift? Well, what I think it gives you, and this is very powerful, is this. It gives you a blank slate. It gives you a nothingness, where the world will accept new ideas, where the world will accept you as you are, where the world will accept any new type of way of doing things that was never done before. New norms are easy to introduce at times like this, because everybody is ready for it. If any of you have been living in quarantine, now it's normal to see, 20 kids of people that you never knew had kids on calls, right? Because they're at home with their family. I know most of my, colleagues' families now, which I didn't know before. We now telecommute. We now do gyms online and many other things. So any new ideas are possible. So it gives you a lot of playroom for creativity, for the self, and more importantly, your why. So what I want you to take away from this is that you need to do now what you were born to do, to adapt. And with that, I want to invite you on a challenge. And a challenge to think differently. Because of the time, I'm going to very quickly skip this. These are good examples of companies that were going to be hit hardest by the virus, but they decided to do other things, like Ugly Cookie doing quarantine packs, Deer Room, which was doing normal events, doing live events, Sport ID doing online trainings when they were doing offline ones, and Neural doing amazing music software that is actually growing a lot. So as a summary, I want to invite you to a 30-day challenge. I want you to do one prediction a day of how the world is going to change for you or for the society, and write down one action a day of what you're going to do about it. Because I think the time for doing is not now. The time for doing is going to be when this is over. Now you have to stay safe. And feel free to share it with your friends, or maybe with me on my Telegram channel, t.me/AMADSarlet. Join me on that challenge. I'm going to be doing it myself. But most of all, stay the F home, right? Keep everybody safe right now and make sure that we survive this. And then we get our blank slate. Thank you.
Do you think it's a good time to start a business right now?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent time to start the business right now, right? As I said, during a lot of depressions, some of the best businesses around were started, right? If we just look at, the previous one, 2007, 2008, Airbnb, Slack, WhatsApp, all of the biggest industries companies were started then. And investors were investing very actively then in the seed stage because they knew this was going to happen, and it's going to happen again.
And what businesses will be under the radar of investors right now?
I think businesses that are anti-fragile, right? If you haven't read the book, just Google Anti-Fragile by Nassab Taleb. Businesses that are ready to persevere in environments like this, right? So I think if I was an investor, I'm just looking for founders who show the ability to persevere in times like this, right? Because there's some founders who are broken by this, and some founders that are not, right? And the companies I gave as an example, right? I'm working with them as either an investor or a mentor, right? And again, some of them are supposed to be dead, like Deal Room, right? They were doing physical events. That industry is dead, right? So some founders in that moment would be like, well, okay, we're dead. And other founders would be like, wow, this is an opportunity. Now we can go online and do 20 events a day, 1,000 events a day. So I think it's about the mindset. Right? I'm looking for entrepreneurs and founders who have that mindset. And the ones who are suffering and saying the world is horrible and everybody's going to die, well, yeah, they're not going to start a very good business right now.
Thank you. More good questions. You said about the valuation of money, right? And what is your opinion about purchasing power of new digital currencies, which is based on private golden standard? We see classical national currency without golden standard.
Money as a concept in general is, again, going back to history, is something we just invented. It doesn't exist, right? It's something that is literally thin air. We just needed to trade more efficiently, right? But money needs to represent something. So personally, I think if we all agree that money that doesn't get linked to gold represents something in our minds, sure, it will work for a while, right? But we all need to agree on that, and that's, I think, the difficulty in that space. So what I actually think is that the possibility is that we'll see something new completely, right? Not the way blockchain is doing it now, not the traditional money the way it's doing it now. I would love to live in a world where there is no money, but that's probably unrealistic at this point.
Thank you so much. One more question. What changes in management system can you expect over the next 10 years?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think one of the main things is that people who work for businesses, they're going to have a lot more freedom. And what I think that means is a lot of people will have the ability to not just work for one company, but say 2, 3, or 4 from home, right? Work on many companies, many projects. So I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility. And you need to manage that flexibility. So I think as a manager, you'll be needing to give much more power and responsibility to all the people involved in your organization. And it needs to be much less top-down and much more decentralized. Because if it's top-down, it's not going to be as anti-fragile when things can change really, really quickly. So for that, you need to be looking into more decentralized approaches to management. I believe and I gave a talk at Venture Day Minsk last year about it, that management was only invented to manage lazy people. But I think the virus is going to force people to be less lazy. And therefore, you need to manage them less, right? You just need to guide them and give them something to do.